Hello and welcome to another episode of Hair Bear Short Stories. And if you found your way to my cozy little corner of the internet and you like a story or two, sit back and relax, have a listen, have a laugh, take your shoes off and set a spell. So today, as I've finished writing it, I'm going to read chapter 10 of Whole. Are we going to write the next chapter and have a buffer in between writing and recording? Hell no. Finished writing it, I'm going to read it. Here we are. So let's get right into it with chapter 10 of Whole, Family Matters. Ben's shower facilities consisted of a 3-foot tin bath, a hose, and a bucket with holes punched in it. It did make things interesting in the winter, but Napa winters were nothing on New England. On particularly cold days, though, there was no shame in an electric kettle and a sponge bath. He had just dried off and was digging his best clothes out of their garment bag, 2 overlapping bin bags, when his cell phone rang. He was glad he had remembered to leave the ringer on when he powered it up because it had somehow ended up on the floor under a sock. No need to check the caller ID, only one person had that number. He flipped it open. "Dick's Hot Dogs. If you like hot dogs, you'll love Dick's." "I knew my phone's AI was eavesdropping on me," Steve replied. "Some people really find themselves on the West Coast. How was the flight?" "Middle seat in economy. It was magic. Got the paperwork with a client done in record time, though, so I'm ready to head out for my hotel. I assume I'm picking you up?" "Unless you want to ride on my handlebars. It might be a nice bonding experience to reconnect, but I don't think it will do wonders for my reputation." Steve scoffed. "All the boys would be clamoring for you if they think you bagged a beauty like me. Be there in 20. Ben flipped the phone shut and continued getting dressed. One of the benefits of having such compact accommodations was that there wasn't much ground to cover when tidying up for company. He didn't even start until he was finished getting dressed and still had 5 minutes to kill before Steve's rental car rolled up the gravel path. He looked much the same as he had when Ben had last seen him several years ago, except maybe with a nicer suit and more expensive haircut. He was tall and athletic, svelte where Ben was just skinny. He was never quite sure what the specific difference was between the two descriptors, but the two of them standing next to each other made a good visual demonstration. Ben met him as he got out of the car, and Steve wrapped him in a rough bro hug. Ben reciprocated for a moment, then pushed him back. "All right, I don't want to smell like your cologne all night." "It could only increase your odds," Steve replied, giving his collar a theatrical sniff. "Maybe, but with my track record lately, Bucklore would increase my odds." "Who's been telling you where I shop?" Steve said with mock indignance. He looked past Ben to the house. "Nice digs, little brother. You gonna invite me in?" "There's much more to see on the outside facing away from it," Ben said, "but be my guest." He gestured toward the door. "I like it," Steve said as Ben followed him through the door. "It's like refugee chic." "You know, that's exactly what I was going for. I found it incredibly affordable." Ben glanced at his bedside clock. "It's a bit early yet, and I don't know about you, but I'd rather pre-game with a cup of coffee if we're going tasting first." "Sure, so long as it's not strained through a pair of your underwear." "After a couple wears, it does give the coffee a unique earthy flavor." "I'll take your word for that," Steve chuckled. Ben tutted. "Well, if you insist on being unadventurous, I'll get the French press," he said, and busied himself with the kettle. Steve settled into one of Ben's rickety chairs and seemed to relax after a few experimental wobbles to make sure it would hold him. "So," he said with a kind of false casual tone that Ben could always spot immediately, "tell me about this scuffle you had." Ben's spine stiffened slightly. This must have been on Steve's mind since he mentioned it on the phone. He'd even commented at the time on how out of character it was. Now that Ben had a better idea of the true nature of the situation, he wished he'd kept his goddamn mouth shut about it. Probably best to downplay it. Just some drunk assholes joyriding at night," he responded with equal insouciance, not turning around. "Really?" Ben could hear the raised eyebrow without turning to look. "It seemed to be enough for you to be concerned about your friend that was with you." Ben poured the hot water into the double portion of coffee grounds in the press and turned to Steve. "Are you lawyering me, Stephen?" he said with the exaggerated diction they used when they thought the other one was taking themselves too seriously. Steve grinned but continued doggedly. "No lawyers here unless you need one, brother, but my spidey senses are tingling. If it's really no big deal and you've got a handle on it, cool. But if you need help, you know I've got your 6. Ben sighed slightly as he pressed the plunger and poured 2 cups of coffee. There really was no use in trying to put Steve completely off the scent. They knew each other too well, and Steve was too accustomed to looking out for him. He'd have to give him a bit more info without going into the whole thing. Ben might not be a lawyer himself, but he understood plausible deniability. He could not get his brother too wrapped up in this. It could wreck his budding career. "Do you still take your coffee the same?" "As black as my soul," Steve replied. 3 sugars, cream, and vanilla it is." Ben never used to like coffee, and if he ever had it, he took it much the same way, but his dependence on caffeine and a limited budget had afforded him the opportunity to develop a taste for it black. He just happened to have those in his mini-fridge because, as fate would have it, that was how Nana took her tea, minus the vanilla. He set the coffees on the table and slid the sugary abomination toward his brother, who sipped at it quietly as he let Ben gather his thoughts. Ben did not want to lie to his brother, but given what he was coming to realize about the nature of the blackouts he used to have, he didn't think he could allude to a reoccurrence without Steve putting the pieces together. "I guess I was just embarrassed because I bailed on him," Ben started. "When I hadn't seen him the next day, I was worried, but I caught up with him later, so it's all good." Steve nodded and set down his mug. "Was your friend all right?" "Yeah, Gato was okay. A little bruised up, but he's a tough dude. I tried to get him to run as well, but he wouldn't leave the broken down tractor we were in the middle of fixing." That last part was at least mostly true. In fact, in an abstract way, you could say that he did bail out of the situation. It certainly wasn't him that was present after he blacked out. Kinda. Sorta. "You alluded to the guys you fought with being hard to prosecute. Did you know them?" Even before years of law school and working with lawyers, Steve always had a nose for detail and an unwillingness to let them go until they made sense to him. Ben was pretty sure he chose law school instead of a detective career for the salary. "Nah, I didn't know any of them specifically," Ben replied, as casually as he could. "But you can smell family money on people out here. I'm sure you know how it is." "Sadly, yes. I end up working for many of them, in fact. You don't think there will be any retaliation from their side?" "Not the way you're thinking," Ben thought. "I don't think so. Gato said after I bolted, they sort of lost interest and left." "They gave up when they were only against one guy instead of 2? Ben shrugged. "Drunk people do weird stuff. Sometimes they get all wound up, then lose interest." Steve tilted his head to the side to concede the point. "True enough. God knows I've talked down plenty of angry drunks." "You wouldn't have to if you'd stop hitting on their girlfriends." "I do my best work under pressure," Steve chuckled. Ben relaxed a bit. Hopefully that was enough to lay the subject by. Steve took another contemplative sip of his coffee and gently set it on the table. Ben was just opening his mouth to steer the subject to their night ahead when Steve said, "Do you remember when we were kids, before you began your therapy?" "Damn it." "Sorta," Ben shrugged. "Not really well." "Also true. We never really talked much about that time, did we?" "Well, one of the things I worked on the most in therapy was to move forward." As hints went, it wasn't terribly subtle, but Ben was feeling a bit cornered. Steve nodded. "That's what Mom and Dad always said too, but I think someone needs to remember to keep some things from happening again." This was an odd mood for Steve. "What things?" Ben asked. He was pretty sure he had an idea. Steve shook himself as if physically ridding himself of his moroseness and old memories. Then he looked up and grinned, his usual self again. "Nothing you need to worry about, little brother. Now, where is this tasting room you were telling me about?" Steve followed his brother through the door into the tasting room, while Ben animatedly chattered to him about vintages, grape varieties, flavor profiles, and other wine buff things that Steve never really got. He did love just how into it Ben got, though. He always knew Ben didn't tick the same way Steve and their parents did, but he never for a moment believed Ben was stupid. He had encouraged Ben for years to pursue anything that interested him, and now he sat and basked in the glow of his little brother's enthusiasm. "I doubt there will be any left of the vintage Nana brought me the other day," Ben said with an expression of one breaking some bad news, so Steve assumed this was meant to come as a blow. "But they always have great selections here. Plus, Nana would be apoplectic if I didn't bring you by to meet her." He grinned. "The feeling's mutual. After all you told me about her, I definitely have to say hello. Her and your friend Ronnie." "Yeah, I tried to get her to come out with us tonight, but she's busy with a project," Ben said. There was something else behind that statement, something in that pause. Steve filed it away for later and brought his focus back to his brother and enjoying this experience with him. "Evening, gents. What'll you be having then?" A matronly older woman stood behind the wine bar, beaming at them. Ben introduced Steve to Nana and vice versa. The look of pure delight on her face was a thing to behold. "Young Benjamin did mention you'd be coming to visit, so I've put something special by," said the old dame with a wink. She pulled a half-full bottle of some red wine or other from under the bar and poured a measure into 2 glasses. From what Steve could see from their fellow customers around them, they were generous measures at that. Nana struck him as someone who didn't do anything by halves but hit life at full throttle. He immediately loved her for it. Ben was excited when he saw the bottle and explained it to Steve in great detail, which he immediately forgot. The wine was really good, though. "Well," said Nana, "now that you've wet your whistles, what else can I interest you in? A flight of whites?" Steve inclined his head humbly. "I am but a neophyte beginning on this journey," he said, sweeping his hand out dramatically. "I am in your hands, good lady." Journey turned out to be an apt word. Nana was obviously knowledgeable in the offerings of the establishment and how to string them together, one taste at a time, to best enjoy all of them. "I've always known wine could be paired with food," Steve said with a warm glow beginning to settle on him. "But I didn't know you could string them together with all the other wines." "Best thing to have with your alcohol is more alcohol," Nana said with absolute conviction. "Words to live by," Steve replied. Nana excused herself to wait on some other customers while the brothers enjoyed their current array of tasters. "I've had most of these on their own," Ben said, his cheeks pink, "but it's such a different experience matching them end to end." "You're too much of a purist, Benny," Steve said, throwing his arm over Ben's shoulders. Ben chuckled. "Nah, I'm just too broke." "Well, you're on my dime tonight. Point out where you think are the best places and I've got the tab. Who knows?" Steve gave Ben a sly look. "Maybe you'll break your dry spell." There were, in fact, a number of lovely women amongst the clientele, a pair of which Steve had even caught furtively glancing in their direction, then looking away and pretending they hadn't. Ben's cheeks reddened further. That's not even on my radar. Tonight's about you and me, man. Like the old times, but better." Steve gave Ben a cheeky grin. "Exactly," he said. "The night is young, brother. Drink up." So now we've officially met Ben's brother Steve. What do we think of him? He definitely does seem to have Ben's best interests at heart. But what does he know about what happened before? What exactly did happen before? Stick around and find out. So happy belated Thanksgiving to everyone. I hope you had a wonderful time, and I hope you're all prepared for the absolute madness that is the Christmas season. And as always, if you like this story, make sure you slap upon the like and subscribe button. And hopefully, we'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care, be good, and bear up.